Feeling the need for change is at the heart of your ability to make it happen. Welcome to Turning Inward. I'm Vivian Carrasco, your midwife, teacher, and host for this podcast. Together, you and I are going to navigate the interior life. And we're going to do that by unearthing our personal truths, our own insight, and our inner knowing. These are weekly teachings that are brought to you by hard-nosed scientific evidence focused on spiritual direction with integrity and self-awareness. In 2 words, this is your inner work. This is the art of mental training. I have been so much fun getting ready for this. Over the last 4 years, I've sort of been working through what love being human is. But I wanted to say that tonight is really sort of a celebration of the last 4 years of work. Long story short, I had a pretty dark period in my life, did some things and then created a pause for myself that then created a shift in direction. So I didn't recognize exactly what those things were. I don't know if I did them intuitively or whatever, but they made a significant difference for my quality of life. And over the last 4 years, as I've worked with individuals and groups to give birth to give meaning, to give insight to the sort of revelation that was given to me, that is love being human. Its 4-year anniversary is October the 18th. I've been noodling on what that is for me, what that means to my community, and how I'm supposed to teach it. So this is a celebration of that. But the first thing that I'd like to do, and this is what I do with all of my teachings, is we start by centering ourselves. And so I'm just going to toggle the camera off. And what I'll ask you to do is, if you feel safe, to close your eyes, or you can stare forward in a sort of soft gaze without focus, lifting your chin slightly, dropping your shoulders, uncrossing your arms and legs if you've crossed your arms or legs. And whether or not we're together now live, which I am so grateful to be with you live and in person, or you come back to this later, or we extend our circle by time traveling in the future with other beautiful humans. This will connect us. And so just begin to breathe deeply. Inhaling, extending the exhale. Inhale, belly rise. Exhale, belly soften. So physically, I'm sort of having my arms open, my palms up. And in my mind's eye, I'm just extending my hand out to you and holding it lightly, connecting us energetically, connecting us through the digital waves in a sacred circle of support and of love. And just take a couple of more deep breaths here. And start to wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes. If you're not standing on them, I'm standing up. And come back. The art of mental training is what I have figured out as the absolute first step to transformational change. So we have a way of being wired, and knowledge and understanding of that initial wiring is essential in order to move forward, or it'll at least make the struggle less difficult. So I call this the first step in the action plan to installing a new way of being. We're going to focus on feeling today, but after feeling and that's love. And we're going to focus on feeling today, but beyond feeling is being consistent and in alignment with your chosen values. And at the bottom is your outcome, but not just a yes-no outcome or an either-or outcome, but an outcome that you've created as a possibility. So, that you've expanded. Right now, my hands seem to be going to the edges of this box. Like your outcome is more than you even can sense as possible based on your past, based on what you know. So it is beyond your knowing. And that's the sort of intention of moving through the world, of feeling and being in this way, where your inner knowing compels you forward. Because if we rely on this problem-solving mechanism that we call our brain, we're really totally limiting ourselves. We're limiting ourselves to a single, maybe the metaphor that's coming up right now is a single piece of fruit or vegetable when we have an entire buffet of life. So this is an initial step in enlivening your living. And what I wrote down here is that it helps you back out of the war within. So we have this very vocal, powerful voice in our head. This, you can call it We have tons of names for it, but it's a critical voice. It's not very supportive. It's not very positive. It's super, super critical. And then on top of this voice, we have our culture and we have our society's expectations that literally box us in. I'm gazing at this for me. It keeps us in this box. And so if we only trust our brain to do that, then it's not going to give us the right answer, the best answer, because our brain is designed a certain way. And that's what we're going to talk about first. So I call this the 21st century gym, like this mental gym. And we start by knowing ourselves and getting some cognitive control. Because most of the time what happens is we skip that feeling and that being, and we go directly to outcome. And we struggle and force ourselves to get to the outcome when the way that our brain is designed, it's actually not going to be happy with that outcome. You're going to get to that outcome and then you're going to want to get to another one because your brain is a problem-solving machine. So if you've solved a problem, it's going to say, okay, thanks, great, let's go on to the next problem. It is not designed to sit in fulfillment and sit in satisfaction and meaning and say, this was a great goal, I'm so proud of you. No, it just moves on to the next thing because it is continuously problem solving. So if you allow the brain to sort of take you as a race car through life, you never see the scenery. And if you don't know how to put the brakes on it, then it's a pretty dangerous ride. So what we're going to do today is we're going to illuminate our inner world a little bit. And I call this shining a flashlight instead of pushing or forcing with power, with force, with will. Because one of the things that I know that I felt when I was going through this is I was continuously criticizing myself and saying, I'm smart, why can't I get this right? I'm trying so hard, why can't I do it? And it was this unawareness of how limited our willpower and this prefrontal cortex juice that's here. It's very, very limited. What really is the operating system of our brain is our limbic system. It's the most primitive part of our brain. And if you were to, hopefully you can see my hand. So this is a way to model the brain. So you put your thumb in and you fold your fingers over. And this basal part here is where the limbic system is. And then the amygdala, and then in the front here is your prefrontal cortex. And this is where all the limited reasoning is. But here is our fight and flight response. So it is literally designed to minimize danger. It is built to draw you away from what you fear. And what I recognize that happened or shifted in my life when I went through what I call the dark years, in order for something to be different, what actually happened is, or over those period of dark years, I was continuously moving away from what I was afraid of. I knew what I was afraid of and I didn't want to go anywhere near it. It was a very limited, my life was kind of stressful. It was a struggle. It was frustrating. But the shift that I felt is when I started moving towards what I loved, what I enjoyed, what was rewarding for me instead of away from what I feared. So if you can visualize that shift in direction, that is the literal pivot that happened in my life in order for everything to be better. Nothing different on the outside, just that war within came to this peace agreement, right? We developed a Switzerland inside and said, I understand what you're afraid of, but it was more important to move towards what brought me joy. Because that fear that I feared was not an immediate and present danger. It was sort of a paper tiger. What if, I was married, muddled in the past, or worried about the future and not really present and being in what was going on now? So there's a neuroscientist called Vivian who talks about it as the fundamental organizing principle of our brain. So imagine your brain is designed to be afraid. It is designed to minimize your danger. So even if you don't recognize it, if you don't consciously are aware of it, if something were to move in the room, my brain would go on alert. So you're designed for fear. The other thing that was interesting as I went through the research again to go through this is when we're moving through a metamorphosis, a shift in our life, in our way of being, very, very often it is different than what our social circle is at the present time. and we are social beings. So what I learned from the research that is relevant to my experience, and it might be relevant to your experience, is anytime that you're trying to be different than you are, and you're pulling yourself away from your social structure, your existing social structure, that is going to be painful. It literally lights up the same areas of your brain as physical pain. If someone's turning away from you, if someone is rolling their eyes, if someone is just dissing you, that's literally going to put you into this, they call it an amygdala hijack, but it's literally going to put you in a very fearful state. So research has shown, like, if you take a Tylenol to numb the pain, it'll also numb the social pain. What is the name of the guy who did the triangle? It wasn't Joseph Campbell. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So this is super interesting. What I found is that in the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he identified safety, shelter, and food as a base need. The latest neuroscience, the latest research over the last 10 years is proving him wrong, because right alongside that need for safety, for physical safety, no one's holding a gun to my head right now. There's not an immediate and present danger outside with any active nature or anything. So if I were to become aware of that, then you would say that my bottom need is met and I can move on to the next, but that's not true. The need for social wiring is actually right alongside of it. So the reason I say that is because it's just a way to sort of emphasize how absolutely intrinsic it is for you to be connected to a buddy, to a person, to one being that can be supportive of you as you move through this metamorphosis, this transformation into a new way of being. Because I'm going to tell you that it is going to absolutely bring you to your rawness. And if your social circle does not support it, your immediate social circle, the chances are you're just going to revert back to what you are, because it's absolutely too hard for you to grow out of those relationships. Your brain won't let you. Your brain just won't let you, because it's more important to be a part of that tribe, to still feel like you're a part of them, than for you to grow into where you know you're supposed to be at that deeper self, until it isn't. So I felt this inching towards me being different for years, probably 5 to 7 years. And it wasn't actually, my case wasn't really of my choice. The metamorphosis happened because my boys became men. So there was this empty nest syndrome. My husband retired from the military, so there was this shift of identity. I knew what it was like to be a military spouse, an active duty military spouse. I knew what it was like, and I felt comfortable around the armed forces and the army and our base and all of our cultures and rituals. I was a student, so I've been going to school for my entire life. And in 2009, I graduated from like a terminal degree. So I had reached what I thought was the end of my learning. So mentally, I had thought it was the end of my learning. Like, I can't go to school anymore because this is a doctorate and that's the end. That's not true, I've realized, because I'll be in school forever because I'm an eternal student. And thank God for that, because I'm such a nerd. So all of these metamorphoses were happening to me. And it was like the walls were collapsing because I was losing all of these social sort of networks. So long story short, it's going to be difficult. So I want you to find a buddy, a person. This is where if you're processing trauma, maybe you have a therapist. If you're looking to achieve an outcome, you might have a coach. What I found that my clients have is they have a full array of support. Like, they have an entire team, like nutritionists and physical trainers and different people that they can go to for different things as they evolve. And I really believe that's what makes them successful, is one, that they've reached out for help, and two, that they recognize that they're rebuilding themselves with a team, because it's just not easy for a human being to look at someone and say, okay, it's okay for you to change. We recognize that evolution up until, teenage years. But once we've matured in our body, we're not as compassionate towards shifts in people. We want things to stay the same generally, because that's how we're wired. So when we're driven by our limbic system, we don't think creatively, we don't work well with others, and we don't make informed decisions. So it literally makes us less human when we're afraid. I wanted to read this to you because the threat response is our organizing principle. So it is how our physical body, like when I talk about love being human, this is the human piece. We really have to understand that this is how we're designed. So this threat response is also known as the fight or flight, the avoid response. And it's an extreme form, the amygdala hijacked, named after the limbic system that can be aroused rapidly and overwhelming emotional way. So I wanted to start with knowledge because you have to be aware and understand how you're hardwired before you can move towards your yes, before you can move towards your joy. So there's a lot of different ways to observe your brain. One of the ways that I remember that I used to do it is I would imagine, because I felt like there was this tornado around me of emotions, I would imagine myself in the center of the tornado. And, I wasn't changing the outside scenario, but I was safe in the middle. So I would visualize myself safe, like still knowing that this tornado is happening, but I would visualize myself safe in the center. And that helped me to get more of a eagle perspective, sort of a bigger perspective of what was happening to me than like right here. So if you imagine yourself looking at a canvas, like if I'm looking at a painting and the painting is like stuck up to my nose, I'm not going to be able to see much. So somehow we have to sort of bring this perspective building so that we can step back from that inner war and look at it. And what I'm suggesting that we do is that we start to name our emotions. So I have some notes here on knowing thyself is the first step to transformational change. And at the dawn of our Western philosophy, Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. So without the ability, you are automation, driven by fear, greed, or habit is what I wrote down. But how do we free ourselves from this automatic response? And the basic skill. This is the basic skill. It's called introception. Introception is studied by Kirk Brown at Virginia Commonwealth University. And what he did is he actually found in his research that your level of introception actually correlated. So if the more aware you were of your inner world, the happier you were, the healthier you were, the faster you healed from disease. This guy actually didn't believe his own research because he couldn't fathom that this single skill correlated to all these things in your life that made you happier, healthier, and overall increased your general well-being. So introception is the key. Is the key that unlocks the door to that stepping back from that war within. And the cool thing is that this guy came up with an assessment. So in the notes to the webinar, that's what we call this, right? In the notes, I'll put a link to the assessment, but you can find it if you Google it. It's called MAAS, the Mindful Awareness Attention Scale. And I grew up like reading Cosmopolitan because my mom would leave it laying around, and I loved the quizzes. I loved reading the quizzes. It didn't matter that it was not age appropriate for elementary school or middle school, whatever I was at the time. But I love sort of identifying where I was. So that's my first tip to you is, and I'm going to say this with caution, do not assign a story to it. Don't give yourself like that sort of grading scheme that we're used to in school. If you don't score high, it doesn't make it negative. It doesn't make it bad. This is just a way for you to identify where you are on the scale. So it's a really quick pencil quiz. It's 15 questions, and you want to answer it pretty much without thinking because your brain will automatically sort of trick you into answering it in what you want it to be rather than what it actually is. So give yourself a 3-minute time limit, go through the questions super fast without thinking about it, and then just identify on the baseline of where you are on the mindfulness awareness attention scale. That'll tell you that then you can give yourself a before and after, like before your training, after your training, how do you feel? These things can also sort of vary in waves. If there's something serious going on right now or a big decision coming up or something that sort of has your threat response idling at a pretty high level, I would assume, and this is just a hunch, that it's going to change your score. So feel free to take it as often. You'll probably get used to the answer. So every once in a while, you could retest and see where you are on the awareness scale. So observing our own thinking changes what we think about. It literally gives us the opportunity to notice the subtle signals that are happening, and then it allows us to expand into more choices. And this is where the sort of the magic juice is, right? What's that inner knowing? What is that deeper sense of what all the intellects together are telling me towards? Because if we're relying only on this brain, the brain is going to keep us away from danger. But then we have our heart, and we also have our gut. We have the entire nervous system that is here to help us make decisions. So I'm just encouraging myself and all of us that are here to expand our decision-making capability by building on our introspection. Okay, so I said I'd focus on feeling, and I'm not going to focus on actually how we're feeling, but I am going to talk about our emotions. So I don't know if it was part of my culture, part of the broader culture, part of me being Mexican, part of me being Catholic. I'm not sure exactly where it stemmed from, or being a girl even. But I felt like this training or this socialization around keeping my emotions to myself. And I'm a pretty expressive person. So if you're not talking about your emotions, you are literally going against your own biology. And this is really, really, really fascinating research. So the other thing we sometimes might feel like is if we talk about our emotions, then it expands them. And we don't want to overdo what we're feeling, right? We're super courteous most of the time about other people, and we don't want to put our business on their side of the fence per se. But here's what happens when you don't talk about what you're feeling. And this is proven by research, like science. This is our biology. But if we suppress our emotions, neuroscience tell us that the limbic system actually stays at the same level or gets worse. So when you try to suppress your emotions, your limbic system, that protection system, gets worse, or it stays the same. When you, in a very simple way, just express that emotion, it lowers your limbic response. And when your limbic system is like in high gear, I mentioned this earlier, it makes you less smart, it kills your memory. And here's the really interesting thing. You and I, especially me, I think if I don't share my emotions, I'm keeping them to myself. But that's actually not true. If you hold back and suppress your feelings, other people's blood pressure goes up. So subconsciously, because it's in our biology, the other person will perceive you as a threat. That was earth-shaking for me. So I've been interested in the industry of self-help and optimal, whatever they call it, personal development, you name it. I've always been super interested in that. And it's funny, one of, our family are sort of the truth tellers. One of my sisters said to me something like, you read all of that, but why don't you actually do it? And I muddled on that for probably years. But what I recognized this last week as I was researching for this class is that's what she was trying to tell me. And she might not even realize that that's the insight that she was giving me. But I thought if I was being nice, if I was suppressing my feelings, if I was not sharing that I didn't agree with something or I preferred something else, and I was being cooperative or whatever it is that my brain was saying was keeping me safe, instead of sharing what I actually thought, it was creating a threat response in everybody else around me. It's in our biology. So don't trust me on this. Don't trust the neuroscience. Don't trust the scientists. Just try it. One of the interesting things about this type of learning, this experiential learning, the learning of this century, is that we don't need to take anyone's word for this stuff. Like, no one else is a better expert of you than you. So my invitation is for you to just try. Try to share your thoughts. And I've got a specific tool to help you with that, because that's kind of broad, right? How the heck am I supposed to do that? I haven't done it my whole life. How am I going to do it now? Well, the technique I have for you, and this is the actual experience part, is to label your emotions. One of the things that happens when you label your own emotions, so this is the step before you even express your own thoughts to someone else, your own feelings to someone else, internally, because this is we turn our attention away from the culture and society and all of these things that everyone wants from us, and we turn inward as the first step. After we turn inward, then we illuminate that inner world. And here's the flashlight that I'm offering you, is to very simply begin to label your emotions. As you label your emotions, your vocabulary for your emotions will increase, the better you'll become at perspective taking, at empathy, and then you'll become better at sharing your feelings in a very simple way. The other thing that's important about labeling your emotions is as soon as you internally label your own emotion, imagine any sort of mildly stressful situation. I'll just say, like, let's say my husband and I can't agree on where to eat for dinner. Try to be nice. Internally, if I say, right now I'm feeling frustrated, or right now I'm having the feeling of slight anger, or I'm really tired right now, or I'm not actually even hungry. Whatever it is that's going on, when we label the feeling, it increases our sense of certainty, because our mind is always going to grasp for certainty. I want to be sure. I want to be positive. I want to be absolutely know that this is the right thing to do. So just by labeling your emotion, you'll increase your sense of certainty. The tool that will help you build your vocabulary of your emotions is a really fascinating tool. The Dalai Lama commissioned it by Ekman, who's another famous neuroscientist, a few years ago. And it's called the Ekman's Atlas of Emotions, and you can find it online. Because even the Dalai Lama says we have to become aware of our own emotions. So awareness is sort of the underlying support of all of this. So I talked about the way you're feeling and being in alignment with your values in order to get to that broader outcome. This is the very simple tool to shine a flashlight on that inner world and sort of back out of that war that we have within ourselves, is to increase our certainty by just labeling our emotions, figuring out what it is that we're feeling in the moment. Not suppressing is going to take a while, but knowing that if we suppress our emotions, it's activating the threat response in the people around us subconsciously because of our biology. That's just what's happening. We might think we're being nice, we might think we're being cooperative, but we're actually creating tension. So I thought that was the most fascinating thing. So I offered you 2 tools, an assessment called the Mindful Attention Awareness Scale. And it's in the public domain, so you can Google it. It's 15 questions. And also Ekman's Atlas of Emotions to give you more vocabulary, more options to labeling your emotions. That is the end of the teaching of the art of mental training. This first step in our action plan to installing a new way of being is to know what we're feeling. And I take a bow. If you have questions that come up after the fact that you think about as you're falling asleep, as you're waking up, feel free to send it to me. I'm happy to respond via email, whatever mechanism we're connected. Feel free to send that over to me. But my hope is that this gave you some value, some insight into how difficult it is actually to grow, to change, to be a different way. And if there's one thing that you want to do as a first step, labeling your emotions is absolutely, definitively going to help you. It's going to help you lower that threat response, increase your sense of certainty within yourself, and then help you to think better, make better choices, relate better to other people. And that's what this is all about, relating to ourselves within and then to those around us. So without further ado, I want to thank you for your attention and for your time, and just encourage you to send me questions. And happy 4th anniversary to Love Being Human. Yay! Confetti drop. And because I haven't used this tool for a super long time, I don't use it as often, I'm going to go ahead and end the broadcast. Adios.
If something needs to change and you don't quite know what it is yet, tune in and turn inward. I host an online learning community where we can figure it out together. It feels like a little family, and it's a place where you can be supported and offer support, because togetherness sparks change. Visit my digital home at viviancarrasco.com to learn more.